Hayek's direful claim in the refutation of Bitcoin. So the subject matter of the taxation by means of printing money, or the so-called inflation. So most of us know what that means, although it's not totally clear what it means. But, for example, you're paying $2.25 for a cup of coffee and whatever else comes with coffee. Let's say in a cafe, ambiance, music, etc. And on the other hand, cream, milk, sugar, honey, sweet and low, stirring stick, blah blah blah. But anyway, you're used to paying $2.25 for the coffee, and then one day they say $3.25. So, but that doesn't really tell you what inflation is, because maybe they just decided to make an experiment and see if they could get more money out of it. Right? But and at the same time, everyone's doing it all over, whatever cafe you go to. That could be a kind of collusive practice. It could be some kind of monopolistic practice, quasi monopolistic practice, price fixing, all kinds of things could be in play. So just like those considerations, even though when we know a lot of money has been created, so we can predict the inflation already in advance, there's still the consideration that when thought in the context of our whole worth, will actually help us if we have debt, because our debt will cost us less. Um, and then again, our salary could have gone up. So if our salary's gone up because of the inflation, then that means that the 225 to 325 isn't the full amount. Okay, there's all kinds of considerations in, even though the notion of inflation seems fairly straightforward. There's a little bit of texture to it, right? So the next idea has also some texture to it, which is that what Hayek says is the reason the inflation going up is, yeah, Milton Friedman is correct. Like de facto, it is because people are creating money on the computer, or quote unquote printing money, metaphorically. Um, but the reason they do that is because of the misdirection of resources in the society. If they didn't do that, it would probably be much worse, because you'd get a collapse like World War II, only I would venture to guess, rather than bloodshed in the street, you'd see something more like India. You know, where you have houses costing $1 billion for one guy, and then people breaking their own arms and legs in order to seem more pathetic, so they can beg for money in the street. Um, but that's just a guess. But the point that does nothing. We don't need to get too pathetic here. But the point is, um, what Hayek is saying is the reason the inflation comes is a secondary cause. So what's the primary cause of an unhealthy society which will produce inflation? And so remember, this has nothing to do with fiat currency, the fact they can or cannot adjust the currency. Um, it does in that outside sense that, okay, if you couldn't adjust the currency, you just have a collapse. But then I think it just really be fucked. And it would be much worse. That's a secondary subject. But first, it's a possible subject of discussion. But first, let's stick with the Hayek level. What Hayek is saying is, um, if a lot of people become unemployed and start drawing, and then you give them unemployment, there becomes a secondary market. And this is what he calls the misdirection of employment and the misdirection of resources in general. So, for instance, you get these so-called payday loan people, the so-called credit. So far as I understand it, both sides of the aisle in America are against the predatory loans, just as the Catholic Church was historically against usury. Um, you'll always probably in any society that's roughly similar to our own, have in some have gangsters that are running rackets and loaning people money that can't get money anywhere else because they're in the black economy. They're criminals. There'd probably always be some criminals anyway. But this is a different kind of thing. This is publicly doing predatory loans, publicly being Shylock, publicly uh, taking advantage of the poor. Uh, in a high-end way, lottery does the same thing, takes advantage of the poor, but the predatory loans are probably much worse. Um, but let's forget about that. We don't need to be again pathetic about it. It doesn't matter the morals of it. It's just de facto. People start to work for those payday loan companies because there's a lot of people out unemployed that get desperate and start doing the payday loans. That means part of the people employed are employed on the basis of their how would you say it? They're parasites on the fact that there are some population that's unemployed, but they're gainfully employed because they're making a lot of money doing it. So if you were to suddenly employ people, then those people would become unemployed, and you get other people asking for unemployment. So Hayek's rather harsh claim is that you have to suffer the immediate uh, bad effects of becoming unemployed and the hardship of it, because that would force you to go into a different sector that really needed you, where there was really a demand for the labor. Um, so that then you wouldn't get these parasitical sectors that actually reinforce unemployment. So thinking about it that way, we can see that the cycle of the bad part about fiat currency that can be controlled by the government, isn't really inflation. It's actually that the bad policy is not directing. I think Napoleon's phrase was the science of government should be to. He didn't say should be, but he said the science of government is to not let men's talents go to waste, or their abilities, not let men go to waste, go to seed. We should arrange things such that the most advanced sectors that need employment are most likely to pick up employment there, instead of these polyps or cancers on society like the payday loans becoming big sectors of society, and other things like bail bondsmen and whatever it may be that's parasitical on the continual appetite for unemployment of the economy. So this would be complicated because we have the problem of so much automation. Amazon is so much automized and things like that, where then you have these other issues, Andrew Yang issues, and all this kind of thing coming in. But I think just based on what Hayek was saying, Bitcoin, which is itself anyway a fiat currency, but the only gain is supposed to be that governments can't manipulate it, I think that's no gain at all, actually, in my opinion. It's not even remotely helpful. Two, I think Bitcoin is a kind of a Ponzi scheme because they're trying to get people to get into it. There's a lot of people making money off it. I know that many people have to be sincere about it, so that you can't say straightforwardly it's only a Ponzi scheme. But the true believers uh, are imbeciles because it just there's no sense to it. The only claim that it has that makes any sense is that it's somehow more private or something. But that seems far fetched to me because if it's totally private, it's the same as the Swiss. It's the same as the legalization of hiding your income from the tax man, which the government can't possibly allow so long as taxes are a law. Whether there should be taxation at all, whether all taxation is regressive, that's another issue. But so long as governments actually believe in taxing people with ordinary incomes, which they probably shouldn't. But so as far as they do that regressive policy, they can't possibly allow people to have total privacy about their money, and I can't see how it could be forced into existence against the will of governments any more than that WikiLeaks guy could have just lived a happy life as though uh, he wasn't watched every nanosecond of his life for the last 30 years. It's unrealistic.